Hey, we're back and we're in the Encyclopedia of the Ancient World, and we're going to be talking about the Egyptian religion, at least the early Egyptian religion. Okay, so to start with, they had very tangled different beliefs in different areas. The pre-dynastic period, they had some early Egyptian. Remember, we talked before about two different kingdoms and different villages, and they kind of came together, and they all brought their different gods with them, and some different things. So there was dozens and dozens of different gods, and also many different myths about the gods. Okay, so trying to dive into all of them is a little bit complicated, but we're going to go over some of the major gods. Okay, most of the gods were very specific. Okay, they were specific to objects or to activities. So Anubis was the god of embalming, Khonsu the god of the moon, Sobek of water, Ma'at of justice and harmony, and Thoth was the god of wisdom. Many were associated with particular animal or bird or plant, okay? And for example, you had Hathor, which was a cow or a woman, sometimes symbolized as a woman with a cow head. And like I said, in part of this book, there's just a whole list of different gods, and there's many, many different gods. And so I just want to cover some of them, but let's go back to some of their creation myths with some of the gods, okay? So you have Heliopolis, which was the original city, but it was nothing but chaos. And when they were there in this city, you had sun god Ra. And Ra created himself, according to the myth, the Egyptian myth. And then after creating himself, he decided to create everything else. First thing he did was create the goddess Shu, which is air. Then he created moisture, the god Tefnut. So Shu and Tefnut get together and they produce children, and their children is Geb, which is the earth, and Nut, which is the sky. And from there, Geb and Nut start to have children. They have 4 kids specifically: Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Osiris and Isis, even though they're related, get together, and they're the parents of Horus, one of the fallen gods. Horus's wife was Hathor. She was the goddess of love, happiness, and childbirth. And then you had Anubis. He was the child of Osiris and Nephthys. He is the jackal-headed god of embalming. So some of the other stories that we get from the Egyptian culture is one dealing with the god Ra, okay? Remember, Ra created himself, and he is the sun god. And what they believe is that during the day, he is in his boat rowing across the sky, and that is how the sun goes across the our sky and gives us our day. At night, he is forced to sail through the underworld, and every single night he has to defeat the god of darkness, which is Apep. And if he's successful, then he's allowed to rise again in the morning and start all over again, rowing his boat across the sky. In your book on page 87, it talks about Osiris and Isis. This is an interesting story, and it says that Osiris took the place of his father Geb on the throne and ruled fairly and justly, but his brother Set was jealous and decided to kill him. He made a coffin that only Osiris would fit into, tricked him into getting inside, and then quickly shut the lid and threw the coffin into the Nile. It floated away to the sea, and Set was sure that he had defeated his brother. But Isis, the sister wife of Osiris, wouldn't rest until she found his body. She found the coffin and took it back to Egypt. Set was furious. He hunted down the body and cut it into 14 pieces, then buried each piece in a different place along the Nile. Even so, Isis didn't give up. With the help of her sister Nephthys, she found all but one of the pieces, and Anubis helped her put Osiris back together again. He came to life briefly, and became the father of Horus. Then Ra made him king of the underworld. Like I said, kind of an interesting story there. Then they have a story of Horus, and Horus apparently lost one of his eye in a battle. And this eye is supposed to have healing powers. And because Thoth, the god Thoth, healed it, the god of wisdom. And the myth is that there's this amulet throughout Egypt, and it is the amulet of Ujat, and it's believed to be the eye of Horus. And it's a symbol of sacrifice and something that they try to find and retain. So those are just some of the different gods and some of the different myths about the gods. And all that leads to, what about their normal everyday lives? What about the normal people? And the religion was extremely important to them. Their religion was something that everybody thought about on a regular basis. And there was a temple life. You know, there was temples that they had to bring sacrifices to. They had to worry about different gods. And much of the Egyptian life ruled around the temple. So every temple, no matter what city you may be in Egypt or whatever, had a semi-specific layout, okay? So basically, it was the same basic layout because it was designed by the gods, even though each one was for a different god. First, it was surrounded by an outer wall. Then there was a main gate, or a pylon, which led to a courtyard. And that is as far as the ordinary people could go. They could only go into the courtyard. Past the courtyard were some temples that were dark and very kind of hidden. There was a hypostyle hall, and the columns were very close together, and they looked like papyrus reeds. And the only light came from the windows that were above. Then there was a sanctuary, and that was an even darker place. And it held a statue of the god, whatever god of that temple it would be, and it usually was made of stone. It was also decorated with jewels and different stones. And then adjacent to those, there were some annexes and places that the priests and things could go to. And almost every temple also on the grounds had some type of sacred lake, and which was important for parts of their afterlife. So who ruled most of these temples? It was the priests. The priest was a very important job back in ancient Egypt for sure, and it was something that was sought after because occasionally they would fill in for the king and be almost as powerful as the king or the pharaoh. And they had to be educated, and only a few priests lived at the same time. But there were daily rituals that the priests had to get into, okay? Priests worked on a regular basis. And so the first thing they did, every morning they'd have to get up and wake up the god with a hymn. Then they would open the sanctuary and bathe and dress the statue. Then they would give the offerings to the gods. The people would bring the offerings into the sanctuary, and the priests would give them to the gods. They would give food and vegetables to the god. They would burn incense for the gods. And they also would provide entertainment for the gods. They would bring singers and dancers in so they could entertain the gods. And then in the evening time, they would close the doors at night. And when they did so, especially from the inner sanctuary, when they were done, they would back out slowly and sweep away their footprints as they left. That way, no demon could use the same footprints to get in and approach the god. So all of this was part of their daily routine in ancient Egypt, and things that were important to them in their world. So as you can see, multiple different gods, multiple different things, but it was an important part of their daily life as they were surrounded and utilized the temple on a regular basis. Thanks.